Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
When Rachel moved into her off-campus apartment for her junior year of college, everything seemed perfect. The place was old but charming. Tall windows, creaky hardwood floors, and just enough character to make it feel like home. She was supposed to have a roommate, a quiet grad student named Emily, who had already moved in over the summer. Rachel didn't meet Emily for the first few days. She'd see her bedroom door closed and sometimes hear muffled footsteps at night or soft humming from the bathroom. The landlord told her Emily kept to herself and was a little odd but harmless. It didn't bother Rachel. She liked her space. But by the end of the first week, little things started happening. Rachel would come home to find the lights on in rooms she hadn't entered. Her bedroom door was slightly ajar one night when she was sure she'd closed it. And the weirdest thing, one morning she woke up to find her toothbrush moved to the opposite side of the sink. She chalked it all up to forgetfulness, or maybe Emily being careless. Then one night, Rachel was jolted awake around 3 a.m. by the sound of breathing. Heavy, deliberate breathing, just outside her bedroom door. She held her breath, frozen in place. The breathing continued for almost a minute. Then silence. When she finally got up the nerve to check, the hallway was empty. Emily's door was closed. The next morning, Rachel knocked on Emily's door. No answer. She knocked again. Nothing. She turned the knob. Locked. She left a note on the door asking to talk, suggesting they clear the air, maybe grab coffee. The note disappeared, but Emily never responded. A few nights later, Rachel stayed up late working on a paper. At around 2 a.m., she heard whispering from the hallway, low and fast, like someone was reciting something under their breath. She slowly crept to the door and looked through the peephole. No one was there. But when she opened the door, she noticed a thin line of salt poured along the base of Emily's doorframe. The same thing was in front of the bathroom door. Rachel was officially unnerved. She called the landlord to ask if Emily had ever caused problems. He hesitated, then admitted she'd had episodes before. He didn't go into detail, but warned Rachel not to mess with her or disrupt her rituals. Rituals? The next day, Rachel came home early and found Emily's door open for the first time. She couldn't help herself. She stepped inside. The room was cold, unnaturally cold. The curtains were drawn shut with layers of black cloth over them. The walls were covered with papers, torn book pages, scribbled symbols, and what looked like diagrams of human anatomy. On the floor was a circle drawn in chalk with candles at each point. In the center was a bundle of hair, brown, curly, Rachel's hair. She backed out of the room in horror. That night, she didn't sleep. She pushed her dresser against her door and kept a kitchen knife under her pillow. Around 4 a.m., she heard whispering again, but this time it was coming from inside her room. She turned on the light. No one there. The window was locked, but on her mirror, written in reverse, were the words, "She doesn't like to be watched." Rachel moved out that morning. She called the landlord and told him everything. His response was chillingly calm. "I'll let the next one know to keep their distance." 2 months later, Rachel got a call from a detective. They were investigating a missing person, Emily. Apparently, no one had seen her in over a year. The woman who'd been staying there? No official record of her. The landlord claimed she'd sublet to a friend of Emily's, but he couldn't remember her name. And the room? Empty, completely bare, as if no one had ever lived there. But Rachel knows what she saw. She still has the photo she snapped before she ran, a picture of the chalk circle, the hair in the center, and a corner of the image shows something else, a figure standing in the mirror, watching her.
Story number 2.
When Josh transferred to a new university mid-semester, he was desperate to find housing. The dorms were full, and most leases were already signed, so when he saw a handwritten flyer pinned to the student union corkboard that read, "Room available, quiet, no pets, no questions," he didn't hesitate. The rent was dirt cheap, and the address was walking distance from campus. The place was strange from the beginning. It was a small, dimly lit 2-bedroom apartment tucked behind a crumbling laundromat. The walls were stained yellow from old smoke, and the air felt perpetually heavy, like the windows had never been opened. The roommate, whose name was Dan, was soft-spoken, a little twitchy, and avoided eye contact. He showed Josh to his room and said only one thing before retreating behind his door. "Don't go into my room. Ever." Josh figured Dan was just a private weirdo and let it go. He wasn't there to make friends. Classes started, and he was barely home anyway. But it didn't take long for things to get off. The first night, Josh heard soft, scraping sounds through the wall between their bedrooms. It wasn't just the usual rustling or movement. It was slow and deliberate, like something was being carved or clawed. When he asked Dan about it the next morning, Dan stared at him blankly and said, "Must have been mice." Then came the knocking. Every few nights around 2 a.m., Josh would hear a sharp knock on his door. 3 knocks, never more, never less. The first time, he opened the door to find the hallway empty. After that, he stopped answering. He told himself it was just Dan being weird again, until the night he locked his door. He heard the 3 knocks, knock, 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 and sat up in bed, heart racing. Then, a few seconds later, he heard something else. The doorknob jiggled. Josh didn't sleep. Over the next few days, he started to notice other strange details. The windows were painted shut. The bathroom mirror had been removed. There were scratch marks along the floor near Dan's door, as if someone or something had been dragging something heavy. And worst of all, one night when Josh came home late, he swore he saw Dan's door close, not from the inside, but as if someone had pulled it shut from the hallway. That was when he decided to snoop. He waited until Dan left. He always left around 10 p.m. on Thursdays and didn't return until after midnight, and picked the lock to his room with a paperclip. What he saw inside made his blood go cold. There were dozens of photographs taped to the walls, all of Josh, sleeping, eating, in the shower. They were taken through peepholes, cracks in doors, vents. Beneath the photos were notes, meticulous, obsessive notes, detailing what Josh wore, what time he left the apartment, when he went to bed. In the corner of the room was something worse, a tall, narrow wardrobe with deep scratches down the front. The padlock on it was loose. Josh opened it. Inside was a mannequin. No, not just a mannequin. A crude, human-sized figure made of bundled hair, stained clothing, and a rubber mask made to look like Josh's face. It had his old hoodie on, his socks, and its chest was stuffed with pages torn from his notebooks. He stumbled back in horror, knocking over a small box on the floor. Out spilled teeth, human teeth. Josh ran. He didn't pack. He didn't even grab his phone. He just ran. He reported everything to the campus police, who eventually brought in the city authorities. But when they returned to the apartment, Dan was gone. No fingerprints, no ID, no trace. The walls were stripped clean. The mannequin had vanished. And worst of all, the neighbors swore up and down that no one had lived in that unit for years. To this day, Josh still moves every 6 months. He covers his vents. He never lives with roommates. And sometimes, on certain nights when he's just about to fall asleep, he swears he hears it again. 3 soft knocks.
Story number 3.
When Ben transferred to a new university, he couldn't afford the dorms, so he jumped on a Craigslist listing for a room in a shared house just off campus. The rent was cheap, the house was decent enough, and his new roommate, Tyler, seemed chill. A little intense, maybe. Quiet, serious, but respectful. Tyler was a biology major working on his thesis. Always locked in his room, always scribbling in notebooks or studying something under a microscope. They barely spoke for the first few weeks. Tyler kept to himself, and Ben appreciated the space. But the basement, it always smelled off, sweet and rotting like fruit left out too long. Ben mentioned it once, and Tyler waved it off. Old plumbing, he said without looking up from his notes. Then the noises started. Late at night, Ben would hear dragging sounds from the basement. Sometimes it was thumps, other times scraping. The house was old, so he wrote it off as pipes or rats. One night, he decided to check it out. He crept down the stairs with his phone flashlight on. The basement was mostly empty. A few boxes, a broken chair, and a large covered workbench pushed against the wall. The smell was stronger now. Sweet, metallic, wrong. Ben lifted the edge of the tarp on the workbench and saw tools, knives, scalpels, jars filled with cloudy liquid, and things suspended inside them that didn't look like anything he wanted to identify. He dropped the tarp and left. The next morning, Tyler was in the kitchen making coffee. He didn't mention Ben snooping. He just looked at him and said, "Some things are easier not to know, man. Trust me." Ben avoided the basement after that. But the smell got worse. He started having nightmares. about people with skin peeled back, about bodies stitched together wrong. In one dream, he was in the basement paralyzed while Tyler leaned over him, whispering, "You're not using your body right. I can fix that." Then one night, the power went out. Ben lit a candle and tried to sleep, but he heard the basement door creak open. Then footsteps, soft, deliberate, coming upstairs. He locked his bedroom door and held his breath. The footsteps stopped outside his room. Then came a knock. Not loud, just one single, patient knock. Ben didn't respond. After a minute, the footsteps retreated. The next morning, the power was back on and everything seemed normal. Tyler was gone. His room was empty. The landlord said Tyler had left a note saying he dropped out of school and moved. Ben was relieved, until he got an envelope in the mail 2 weeks later. No return address. Inside was a Polaroid of him, sleeping, mouth slightly open, a line of red across his throat drawn in marker. On the back was a message in the same neat handwriting Tyler used in his notebooks. "You sleep too deeply. You'd never feel a thing." Ben moved out the next day. He still checks his locks 3 times before bed, but sometimes when it's late and the house is quiet, he swears he hears footsteps on the basement stairs, even though his new place doesn't have a basement.
Story number 4.
When Mark first answered the ad for a roommate, he thought it was a steal. A cheap rent in a decent part of town, just enough space for 2 people. His new roommate, Josh, was quiet and polite during the first few days. They shared a few meals, exchanged small talk, nothing out of the ordinary. But then things started to feel off. Josh had strange habits. He never left the apartment after sunset, claiming he had work to do. The bathroom light flickered every time Josh used it. But the landlord said the wiring was old and unstable, so Mark ignored it. What he couldn't ignore was the fact that every morning, Mark's side of the room was messy, his clothes tossed on the floor, personal things moved around. One night, Mark woke to the sound of scratching, like fingernails scraping against wood. It was coming from the wall between their bedrooms. When he asked Josh about it the next day, Josh just smiled and said, "Old house noises." Mark's unease grew, but he tried to brush it off. Then the nightmares started. Every night, Mark dreamed of someone watching him from the darkness, whispering words he couldn't quite make out. One night, he woke up choking, unable to move. In the dim light, he saw a shadow standing at the foot of his bed, pale and impossibly thin, its eyes glowing faintly red. Mark screamed, but no one came. The shadow vanished, and he was alone, gasping for breath. He told Josh about it. Josh only nodded, his face unreadable. Days later, Mark found a journal in Josh's room, stuffed in the bottom of a closet. The pages were filled with disturbing drawings, twisted faces, figures with no eyes, and chillingly, entries about inviting the watcher in. Mark tried to leave immediately, but Josh blocked the door. "You're part of it now," he said calmly. Terrified, Mark ran out and never looked back. Weeks later, a new tenant moved in. The landlord casually mentioned Josh had disappeared months ago. No forwarding address, no word from him. Mark still wakes up sometimes, hearing the scratching at the walls, feeling those unseen eyes watching him, waiting.